So remember that vice presidential debate we had before when Tim Walz and JD Vance were the nicest people in the world to one another and the whole world was just so happy because we actually had a debate where people didn't rip their heads off? Yeah, there was a whole lot of BS going there on both sides. And yes, on Tim Walz's side as well. Yes, he's still one of the most progressive candidates. Yes, he's still somebody I would vote for. But like all politicians, because we're in this country, he had to play the game. Adam Conover is going to break down just how.
So JD Vance and Tim Walz kept it pretty civil in the vice presidential debate, which meant that compared to the last debate's feast of house pets, it was fucking boring. You know, the vice president is a powerless position, and this debate never affects the outcome. So the least they could have done is make this thing fun to watch. Right. Come on. Let's see those two manly men mud wrestle. But nah, Walz just said Minnesota more times than his state has lakes, and Vance was on his best psychopath behavior.
Yeah, the thing about Minnesota, though, is that it is a successful state. So, I mean, I think I would want most of the country running kind of like how Minnesota was run, but I digress.
The dude didn't even fuck a couch once. Give the people what they want, JD. But the real reason I was losing my mind during this debate is that the things the candidates were saying were almost totally divorced from reality. I mean, this debate proved that our political conversation in this country is just in a different fucking universe.
Right, and he's not just talking about JD Vance. Like, obviously, JD Vance is way out of this world. But Tim Walz, while he's more progressive and more who we want, because he's a politician and they have to play the political games, our political system makes him have to live in that outside of this world thing, like Adam was just saying.
From the actual facts on the ground. The candidates told scary stories about problems that do not exist, and then proposed fake solutions to our real problems. It almost seemed like the entire debate was designed to mislead the public and pander to the most ridiculous myths about what is actually happening in America. And that was especially true once they started talking about immigration. Real quick, I want to thank today's sponsor, Ground News, and remind you that you can support this channel on Patreon.
While this is not my channel, I'm just commentating on his channel. I also back him up on that. Ground News is excellent.
Now, let's get back to JD Vance's Criminal Migrant Story Hour.
We've got 25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. We start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime. I think you start with deportations on those folks.
So first of all,
let's fact check this. So according to the Department of Homeland Security and the Migration Policy Institute, it's estimated that the number of illegal immigrants in the country is closer to 11 to 12 million, which is like less than half of what Vance said. And on top of that, criminal remark, yeah, they commit crimes at much lower rates than Americans, percentage basis. So yeah, Vance is just, as usual, lying.
So first of all, the actual estimated number of undocumented immigrants in the U.S. is less than half of what JD just pulled out of his Vance.
Oh, look, he said it.
And even the arch-conservative think tank, the Cato Institute, agrees that immigrants commit far less crime than American citizens.
He said that too.
And all that has been true, by the way, since the fucking 1800s. Immigrants also don't steal jobs. Study after study has shown that they actually improve the job market and help finance programs like Social Security.
Well, even though he said the same thing as I said, you could see that we both looked on our own from two different sources, both substantiated. So obviously we're telling the truth.
But Vance didn't talk about the real issue. Instead, he scaremongered about a fake immigrant crime wave. He even blamed immigration for the opioid crisis.
We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction. Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels.
That's probably one of the biggest lies the Republicans tell because it's so easy to believe and everybody just goes around repeating it.
Got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies.
Oh, yeah, that could work, JD, except that illegal immigrants aren't actually the ones bringing in the fentanyl. The vast majority of illegal fentanyl is seized at official border crossings, where it's carried by people legally authorized to cross the border. More than half of them are U.S. citizens.
So who's committing the crime again? Oh, right. It's us, not the immigrants.
Mexicans aren't bringing the drugs in. Dudes from fucking Texas are. And JD should know this because of his own mom's story. She didn't get hooked on Mexican drugs like in Breaking Bad. She pulled a nurse Jackie and stole it from her job at the hospital. Wow. And that doesn't make her a bad person. Addiction is a terrible thing, and stealing from work is your right as an American. The point is that we're not going to fix America's massive opioid problem by lying about where the drugs come from. So what does Tim Walz do in the face of all this easily?
See, and this is where I didn't really think about this during the debate at the time, but I'm really glad that I watched content like this because he's really put it in perspective for me. Like, because I really like Tim Walz. I still like him a lot, even with the fact that he's all wrapped up in this political nonsense. But at the same time, what he's about to say is true.
Disproven nonsense. Well, he says the Democrats will be even tougher on immigrants.
Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of the largest state and a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen. It was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford.
So the bill Walz is talking about literally would have built Trump's border wall and deported a ton of immigrants. It's an arch-conservative, anti-immigrant bill. But here's Mr. Warm Hugs, Tim Walz, bragging about how tough it is.
And that's what makes it so sad, because Tim Walz, again, is probably one of the furthest left candidates we've ever had this high up outside of, like, Bernie. But he's still wrapped up in the political nonsense. It's not exactly his fault, but it is, because he should just be telling the truth. Instead, he's playing the political game. He's doing it in maybe the most innocent way possible, but he's still very much doing it.
That means the Democrats have adopted the Republican framing on immigration, even though they know it's false. And that's a bad thing, because guess what? When you present a false version of a problem, then you can't fucking solve the problem.
Right, because you're working on a false foundation. There's nothing to fix if it doesn't exist. I mean, there is something to fix, but what they're talking about doesn't even exist.
If you think pneumonia is caused by an imbalance of the four humors, you're not going to cure the patient. You're just going to make a bloody mess. Yep. So why are the Democrats playing along with the lies?
Because they have to.
Because they need votes, and because the public has started to believe those lies.
Exactly. Instead of trying to combat the lies with the truth, they find it easier to just combat the lies with more lies, essentially.
The number of Americans who want immigration to decrease has skyrocketed in recent years to more than half. But this isn't a well-thought-out policy perspective. Instead, public opinion on immigration is basically incoherent. In one poll, 26% of Americans said that immigrants in the U.S. illegally should be deported, while at the same time saying that illegal immigrants should have the opportunity to become U.S. citizens. The literal same people both said kick them out and let them in. It's like getting a marriage proposal that says, "Will you marry me?" and also, "We should break up."
Yeah, it's because Americans are confused because of all the lies. We're working on a logical fallacy in our country, our political system, our government, our economics, everything. It allows people to basically pay for their candidates, companies, and not people, companies, corporations, to pay for their candidates. And then we have to play these political games around these lies that the candidates make up.
Mixed fucking messages. So the Democrats are chasing public opinion, even though public opinion has no fucking clue what's actually going on. So we have to ask, how did Americans get so confused? Well, maybe it's because our entire political system, from the media to the candidates themselves, puts no effort into educating the American people when we get it wrong. I mean, just look at this debate. The moderators were asking questions about 9-month abortions.
Former President Trump said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine.
You see how he shook his head? He shook his head because he's like, of course, that doesn't even happen. And we know it doesn't happen. Thankfully, other Democrats have pointed out that it doesn't even happen. But yet that lie is still perpetuated.
Yes or no?
Just one little problem. 9-month abortions functionally do not exist. Asking if you believe in 9-month abortions is like asking if you believe zombies should eat people's brains. It's fucking fictional. But the moderators ask questions like that because even though it is not happening, the right says it is so often that the public feels like it's happening. In other words, the election isn't being run on facts. It's all vibes, baby.
Vibes, baby. Y'all, go read 1984 and the comic called Department of Truth, please.
Now, there was an even more glaring example of how our political conversation is just completely disconnected from reality. It was how the candidates said they'd handle the housing crisis. Vance, of course, blamed it all on illegal immigrants.
25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country.
What? I'm not even going to fact check that because I know that Adam is, but I can tell you right now that that's a bold-faced lie, and most Americans should also know that that's a bold-faced lie if you pay attention to the real estate market at all.
Okay, I mean, this is just unbelievably stupid on its face. JD, my dude. Have you ever tried to buy a house? The bank asks you for every document you have ever had in your life. So am I really supposed to believe that undocumented immigrants, people who by definition do not even have social security numbers, are buying up all the 3 bedrooms in Glendale? It's ridiculous. There are literally no facts to support the idea that immigrants cause housing scarcity. Even Vance's own source doesn't say that. It says that because we have so little housing available, immigration could theoretically increase demand for housing by an unknown amount in certain areas.
Which makes logical sense. So why wouldn't he just say that? Oh, that's right, because he's trying to make people believe his lies.
But a lot of things cause housing demand. The root cause of high housing prices is that we don't have enough fucking housing. According to every expert, America currently has 4 to 7 million fewer homes than we need. So if JD Vance really wanted to fix the housing crisis, he'd propose that we build more housing.
Right, because, you know, that's what I thought of without even fact checking, even though I usually fact check, and I knew that he would have the facts, and I knew that right off the top of my head. So how does JD Vance, the person who's supposed to try to be running for vice president, not know that? Oh, except for he probably does know that, but he wants to perpetuate what? More lies.
But he doesn't do that. Instead, he blames it on immigrants because he hates immigrants and he wants to deport them. And he wants to deport them because he hates them. The guy just hates immigrants. You know, he's a pretty simple man. So how does Tim Walz reply? Well, he blames a different wrong target.
We could talk a little bit about Wall Street speculators buying up housing and making them less affordable.
Now, that line probably sounds pretty good to liberals, doesn't it?
Did actually sound pretty good to me, but tell me the truth.
Oh, that dastardly corporate power at it again, right? But while yes, private equity buying homes is a very bad thing, it is also statistically insignificant as a cause of the housing crisis.
Now that I didn't know. I really did think that that was one of the major driving factors. I thought the most driving factor was the fact that we have so few homes in the U.S., but I thought that that was another major driving factor on top of that.
Private equity only accounts for a tiny percentage of home purchases made in America, about 3% in 2021, and that's not nearly enough to put serious pressure on the housing market. And yes, corporate landlords who gouge rent are a problem too, but those landlords only have the power to do so because housing is such a scarce resource to begin with.
Right. They're able
So
to
the
capitalize.
root question we have to ask is, why is housing so scarce in the first place? And Tim Walz actually knows the answer to that question. He just has to dance around it, because the truth is, it's rich homeowners. See, in America, we built an economic system where homeownership is an essential part of building wealth. And that means homeowners expect their house to go up in value every year. So they literally want housing prices to be high. And to ensure that they are, homeowners have gotten restrictive zoning laws passed across the country that make it impossible to build affordable housing. And critically, they did so by voting.
Okay, so maybe it wasn't exactly the dastardly corporations, but it's definitely the rich people, the richest in America, who probably own some of those dastardly corporations. So, Tim Walz was wrong, but not completely wrong. It's still the rich, and we still kind of hate them.
One study found that homeowners turn out almost twice as often whenever zoning issues are on the ballot. And another found that when home values rose before a presidential election, more homeowners voted for the incumbent party. But when they fell, more homeowners voted for the opposition. And this is especially true in swing counties. In fact, rich homeowners just straight up vote more often than poor renters, so their interests are overrepresented in our political system. And that makes it almost impossible for politicians like Walz to argue for policies like rezoning that would actually lower housing prices.
And overrepresentation is also why Republicans can win at all. That plus our stupid electoral college system.
Because the people who vote for them literally want housing prices to go up. And that sucks, because Tim Walz actually knows how to reduce housing prices. You can tell because of what's happened in the state he loves to bring up.
Minnesota.
A few years ago, the city of Minneapolis ended single-family zoning, and as a result, they have built a ton more housing. Can you guess what happened next? rents dropped. Holy shit. Turns out that when you have more of something, it gets fucking cheaper.
Wow. It's like supply and demand is actually a thing.
Walz knows that we can fix the housing crisis by rezoning and building more housing. He knows it because he's done it, and it fucking worked.
And that's why I like Tim Walz, except for during this debate, he has to dance around it because we gotta play these stupid political games. I don't fully blame Tim Walz for this. Like, I do, but I don't. Because he should have the spine to not play the political games, and I think he could have the spine to not play the political games. But the political games, or not playing the political games, would actually hurt their campaign because our country's political system is dumb.
But he can't just come out and say it because he wants to win an election. Now,
Right.
the Harris campaign does have a plan to build more housing, and that plan is better than violently deporting 20 million people.
Right. So again, the Democrats are obviously the better choice in this matter. So don't get it twisted. Just because Tim Walz did some dancing around some topics, it does not mean that he's not better than Vance. He's far, far, far better than Vance because Vance is psychopathic like Trump.
But it's also fundamentally at odds with her promise to build wealth through homeownership, because making housing truly affordable requires lowering housing prices, which makes it a worse investment. And the homeowners she needs to vote for her don't want that to happen. So we end up with these tortured debates where Harris and Walz dance around the issue, blaming false villains and trying to avoid pissing off voters.
Oh man, this is like 5D chess. No, like 6. Forget 4 and 5. This is 6D chess.
And you know what? That kind of political jujitsu can work in the short term.
Oh, I like
if the
that
public
better.
believes that crime is out of control, despite the fact that crime rates are falling, well, emphasize Harris's bona fides as a prosecutor. Does the public believe that immigrants are criminals? Well, then sure, partner with the Republicans on a couple of draconian immigration bills. Maybe you can even win an election that way. And hey, Donald Trump is a big threat and so important to defeat that maybe it's okay for the greater good, right?
No.
All of that comes at a cost. Because when you're not truthful with the public, you eventually become chained to the lie. You have to keep locking people up and growing mass incarceration. You have to keep building a useless wall, and you have to keep deporting innocent people while all of our real problems get worse and worse, and the public gets angrier and angrier.
So basically, our entire political system is built on lies, which is why everybody hates politicians, because all politicians do is lie, even the better ones like Tim Walz.
At the end of the day, if you want to stay in power as a political party, you need to actually make the country a better place for everyday Americans. And step one of that is explaining to the public clearly and truthfully the reality around us, the actual causes of our biggest problems. And that takes maybe the hardest thing for any politician to do: cutting the bullshit and being brave enough to tell the truth.
And that is where I'll stop because he summed it up so perfectly like that right there. I like Adam a lot. You know, I saw a couple of his videos from before in the past, just kind of in passing. Again, I didn't really know very much about him. I didn't even know he was a comedian. I probably should have guessed because he's freaking hilarious. But yeah, he's telling the truth here, and we need more people like him out here telling the truth. And that's why I'm doing these videos, this commentary. I'm very small, but I hope to grow so that I can help push this kind of positive information, or maybe not positive, we'll say truthful information out there. But anyways, that's all I got for this episode. If you can, please like and subscribe. Again, brand new channel, so I'm trying to get more views and kind of grow it. So yeah, any liking and subscribing, commenting, interactions will help it out. Appreciate you.